Open up the meeting. 5 minutes late, 7 minutes late. That's okay. So, everybody happy with the minutes on this, from last meeting?
I am.
I'm delighted with them, yes.
Yes. So I think we approved the minutes. So, let's see. We've got, John Mudgett is here to go over the report on the results of the audit. And so we're going to listen to that first. And so, John, you can join us and we'll listen. We'll do that first.
Thank you. Appreciate being here. I did bring along the excuse for why you're getting me instead of the lead auditor on this job, Tyler Kimberly. This is the young Jackson Kimberly born Saturday. Around.
Sweet.
Yeah, so Tyler was otherwise occupied today. He and Jolyn were bringing the baby home, so not a problem. Glad to go.
Yeah, that's sweet. Pretty cute. Wait, does that say his name? Jackson?
Jackson.
His name is Jackson.
Jackson Kimberly, yeah. So you've all probably spent more time looking at these recently than I have. I did review it before we sent it to you. And, you know, I presume you've got notes in the margins, questions, comments.
Yes, he's got them.
And so forth and so on. So would you like me to say anything before we launch into the roundtable discussion? Other than thanks for inviting us and introducing myself, which I failed to do. I am John Mudgett, Jeanette and Crow Wisner's the CPA firm that audited the financial statements. This is our second year with you, so we're starting to feel like we understand it a little bit. Tyler Kimberly has been the lead auditor on the project both years. I've been involved in helping him plan and when questions to, you know, discuss and at the end review and be responsible for signing the reports.
I have a question. You welcome it?
Go for it.
Okay, under material, no, significant difficulties encountered in performing the audit. We did not encounter any significant difficulties in working with management during the audit. So that implies to me that there were some moderate difficulties. Was it Dave?
Does.
Was it Dave?
It must have been Dave.
Okay.
I get a little cranky from time to time. Tyler,
No.
No?
I think that's auditor speak.
Okay.
Or, you know, auditors always kind of.
They just, okay.
We want to qualify everything. No significant difficulties.
Means really nothing.
Went pretty good.
Okay.
Believe me, if we really had the goods on Dave,
You wouldn't be here.
it'd be right here in big red letters.
All right, thank you.
Probably, since you picked up on the 3-page auditor's report to the select board, which is in addition to the main package, which is the financial statement package with the auditor's report on the financial statements, and also in the back an auditor's report on internal controls and compliance. Those two are formal reports that auditors are required to do whenever they do an audit under government auditing standards. And in addition to that, auditing standards require us to communicate formally with those charged with governance. We interpreted that as being the board, not Dave. Okay, so that's why this summarizes some topics that we wanted to make sure we documented our communication with you. And the one you pointed out on any difficulties working with management, that's one of the things that's required. We're required to talk to an audit committee or a board about and disclose anything like that. Other things that are in there, I'll just mention a couple, because one of which I thought was kind of a key thing, at least in my view as an auditor. Under audit adjustments, on the second page of that governance letter, it says we propose 30 adjustments to the general ledger balances provided for audit. In addition, management provided or supplied 4 adjustments to those balances during the audit. 30 adjustments a little on the high side. I think that's where room for improvement, okay? If you get it down to 20 or 10, you know, that's more what I would like to see you be able to do.
Are those just mistakes in daily bookkeeping, or?
Well, if you look at this, it summarizes kind of in general terms what some of those things were.
I have no idea what 7 means.
Adjust deferred inflows relating to property taxes. I'll tell you what it means.
Okay. As an example, what I think Matt's going for is, you know, how significant are these things and what does it mean?
It's not particularly significant to you as managers of the financial results, but auditing standards require, or accounting standards, I shouldn't say auditing, this isn't auditing, this is accounting. Accounting for governments requires that if you don't collect your property taxes within 60 days after the end of the fiscal year, then those dollars are not available to pay your bills. So they get deferred at the end of the year. They're not in revenue, they're over on the balance sheet as a deferred revenue item. Yeah, it'll go into revenue the next year, and any other uncollecteds will come out. Okay, but that's what he's talking about. I'm sorry, it is a little bit accounting lingo, but hey, we got to have something in there to talk about, right? Other things that we talked about, adjusting fund balance amounts. Usually fund balances at the beginning of the year are the same as they were on the audited financial statements at the end of the prior year. If there are significant changes, then you might restate. I think in this case what he's talking about is not something that had to be restated. He's talking about some stuff that got into fund balances at the beginning of the year that really should have been income or expense during the year, and he had to do some adjustments to make the equity accounts at the beginning of the year correct. Interfund transfers and receivables and payables, that's whenever you have an interfund transfer, it's from one fund to another fund, they have to match. And if one's classified as a revenue and on the other end it's shown as a transfer, then they don't match. It's got to be a transfer out and a transfer in. Same with any due tos and due froms between funds. If there's an obligation in one fund to another fund, well, hey, there's got to be a due from in the other fund. So one of the things auditors would do is they'd make sure, do all of those balance, in other words, across entity-wide, it should net to zero. If something's classified incorrectly as, say, a revenue or as a receivable instead of an interfund, then it would be out of balance. We always, in small governments, usually have to make some adjustments relating to debt and proceeds of debt and payments of debt. They get treated a little bit funny in governmental accounting because if you borrow, it's a source similar to a revenue, and if you pay it back, then it's an expenditure, you know, like any other expenditure. But also you have to keep track of the balances. So that's outside the operating funds, outside of the general fund or any of those governmental funds. And it's a separate keeping track of what the balances are, so that when you put it all together and issue what they call the government-wide statements that have all of the assets, including the capital assets and the long-term liabilities, that it all goes together. So we had to make some adjustments of that sort. And then others had to do with, you know, just accruals at the end of the year. amounts that had to be adjusted to show what the accrued compensated absences might be. The very last one on here talks about net pension liabilities and other effects of accounting for the VEMR's pension. You belong to the Vermont Municipal Employees Retirement System, so I don't know, 3 or 4 years back, they decided that the participating municipalities need to recognize their share of the pension liability. And along with the net pension liability, there are some deferred assets and some deferred liabilities which just come about from the way they do it. Because it takes actuaries a while to figure out what the net pension liability is and divide it up amongst the participating municipalities. They have basically a year lag time. So when you see a net pension number for the VEMR's, it's based on a year-old data, and that causes some deferred assets, deferred liabilities for the period in between. Anyway, stuff like that doesn't really affect accounting at the local level a lot. What does affect accounting at the local level is any adjustments that might have been made to any of the operating funds, the general fund and so forth. So those are the areas where I would think room for improvement. Okay, not a complaint, just saying, if you can bring that number down, auditors like to see improvement year to year, or at least these auditors do, because we like you to.
Right, and it looks like we've already addressed the chart of accounts issues
That was the finding that was in the back of this packet, wasn't it? Let me revisit this for just a minute.
It was a holdover from last year that I think we've...
That management and the basically, just for everybody, let me say that we noted the town's accounting software contained funds that did not match up to the funds reported in the financial statements. For instance, we found the town maintains a trust fund in its accounting software that includes special revenue funds, permanent funds, capital project fund, and private purpose trusts, all of which have to be reported separately in the financial statements. So management's response said, management agrees with the finding. Our intent was to implement this following the 2017 audit. As the 2017 audit was presented, the town experienced a changeover in staff within the finance office, and so separate funds within our accounting software were not set up before the end of fiscal 18. Management management understands the importance of the separation and will see the change before June 30, 19. So that's progress, you're right, and we'll of course look for it next year to see how well it flows, if they really do support the opening balances and the activity during the year to get to the ending balance. And if there are any questions during the year, don't hesitate to give us a buzz, and either Tyler or I will be happy to.
So that is the bulk of, that's also kind of a lot of the adjustments that were generated kind of flow from some of those issues with the trust funds and the various funds, how it was set up, and the difference between the prior year and this year, and so I think that alleviating that, I think, has been something Tyler and I have talked about for close to a year now.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. I don't doubt that number is going to get much better next year, and of course, the other thing auditors like about that is fewer adjustments means fewer time in the field, fewer audit hours, and we always kind of quote you a fee limit over which we don't exceed. When we get up to 30 adjustments, we're usually over that limit and working for free. And, nobody likes to work for free. So anyway, thank you, Dave.
But you told us you liked us.
I do like that. We do like you. Yeah, you got it. And what we really like is where we see improvement each year, And that's why.
I can't find the exact paragraph now, but it seems like a key part of the audit is to actually run some tests on the system itself to see that the credits and debits are all balancing out. You don't describe that very much here, so I'm just wondering, is that something that you actually extract data and then you have your own software?
Yeah, it's kind of, that's so basic, we really don't talk about that in the report itself. What this is our pulling all of the accounts out of your system, setting it up. We call this a trial balance report, but it's every account grouped the way they're going to flow to the financial statements, with last year's numbers for comparison, unadjusted numbers, any adjustments that we propose, those 30 adjustments are shown as with the effect, and then if there are further reclassifications that weren't really adjustments, they show up, and then the budget numbers are also on here. So this becomes a pretty important tool for us as we audit to start, flow through, and end up on with a financial statement balance.
So I guess where I was going with this is, do we extract the data and give it to you, or do you actually come in and have some control over that data?
I wasn't here when he did it, but what Tyler generally does is he gets a download from your software, and then he imports that into our system. So you know, he's got your numbers and our numbers to compare, and that's the starting point for what we do in that section. We also do some other stuff relating to internal controls over your numbers, of course, and so a lot of that stuff, you know, gives us confidence that what we're seeing is good. We also generally get a download of all of the detail that makes up those balances, because of course when we get into the nuts and bolts of the audit, we're interested in what individual transactions or adjustments might make up your numbers.
Right. Okay. My questions were really, so we did have a transition year, and there were a number of different hands in the data this year, so that's all.
Understand it?
Yeah.
Seen lots messier situations on a transition, I guarantee you.
Yeah.
I think you guys did pretty good, really. Either that or else Tyler covered up for you. I don't know. I think you did pretty good, yeah.
The new child list.
Not sure he likes us that much, but he is good.
Other key things, well, obviously the audit report on the financial statements, these 2 pages up in the beginning, do say that it's really an unqualified report. We believe the audit evidence we have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our audit opinion. In our opinion, the financial statements present fairly, in all material respects, the financial position of the governmental activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information. So what we're saying is good numbers,
okay.
Good report. And in the back, when we issued the report on compliance and internal control, other than for that carryover finding that we discussed relating to the chart of accounts and the structure of it, that also was, I would say, a good report. We called the matter relating to the chart of accounts and the structure of the accounting system a significant deficiency, which does mean that it's important and needs to be addressed, and it's not quite as tough a classification as saying it's a material weakness. A material weakness is defined in here also, but you didn't rise to that level, but a significant deficiency did need to be addressed, and you've addressed it, so good on that. The other part of that letter is a report on compliance, and we do say that results of our test disclose no instances of non-compliance or other matters that would be required to be reported under government auditing standards. So a couple of pretty good reports from your auditors, and pretty good financial results in here, I have to say. Other things to talk about. I'm seeing some folks that look pretty serious around the board here. I'm wondering what's on their minds.
Wondering if the other shoe's gonna drop and you're gonna say, well,
You didn't find an extra 4 million somewhere.
Yeah.
Do you need it? Do you need it?
do we need 4 million? Yeah, we do. That'd be
What do you
great.
need it for?
Well, let's see, there's a whole list of things. Why, you have 4 million you wanna give away? or-
No, I don't,
Oh.
but I do notice, of course, when I go through and look at fund balances, that most of them are, positive fund balances, with the exception of the general fund, I guess, which was in a deficit position. But I think, by and large, though, for a small town with much work with, I think you came out all right. So no need to look so worried.
Yeah, we're a long-term policy, not borrow, if we could help it, so that's the result, I guess.
I see boards in Vermont that work one of two ways, either the way you just described,
Yeah.
or the other one, which is, we're gonna borrow it now and let the users pay for it.
Well,
And
that's a real serious philosophy, one way or the other.
I don't try to tell people which philosophy to go for.
Yeah.
I know what mine would be, but, I agree that the board has the
Yeah.
responsibility, and they are in a position to make those
Yeah.
kinds of decisions as their voters
Yeah, well, I think
tell
we're
them to.
probably tempering that policy a little bit.
Wouldn't hurt. Moderation, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So is the tax rate going up?
Unfortunately.
Yep. Well, that's life. We have to pay for what we use, and we always like the services. I know I certainly appreciated how my road was plowed. Good Lord, with all the snow that we had, and we had quite a bit up our way, as you did too. But to be able to get out and drive around, guys are doing a good job.
Well, it'd be so nice if you were here on town meeting day and you could
I
lend
can
your
stand up and
support.
say that?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Well, for a price. No, Mary, I think you guys will do just fine with that.
Well, thank you.
Anything else?
It's a relief that went well, and
Yes, I think so, and I'd just say in closing, you don't have to wait till next year, and I know you won't. If anything comes up that you'd like to talk to auditors about, feel free to pick up the phone. We don't consider ourselves to be available to you just once a year to report on these things, but if there's a need to talk about anything, or if you see something that's concerning, we'd like to hear about it anytime. Okay?
Thank you.
thank you very much
Hey,
for coming in. Appreciate that.
you are totally welcome.
Where'd you come from?
My office is in Montpelier, and I actually live a few miles north of there in Worcester. I sometimes tell people the east slope of the Worcester Range, or the Minister Brook Road if you're a trout fisherman. But there are no trout in that stream for you.
Yeah, right. Well, have a good trip back.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have to do anything official about accepting this?
Nope.
Okay.
We should just, probably for the record, just do an adjustment to the agenda. We need to add an agenda item at the end, being executive session,
Okay.
for a pending legal issue.
Okay, so, just so everybody knows that we'll do this at the very end of the meeting. We have to discuss a pending legal issue, something that's ongoing, which we will do in executive session. So, it's not on the agenda, but it is now. Okay, so, I see we have pretty good representation from the Conservation Commission here. So I know you're all here to talk about the emerald ash borer and what I guess you've been running around town counting ash trees maybe. We have a few, I know. So I don't know who's leading the pack here, but we're ready to listen.
Good evening. I got a little bit of a handout for everybody here. You just kind of show my notes.
In case anybody doesn't know, this is John Dumas.
I'm sorry. And I understand I have kind of a limited time to work with here, so I'm just going to jump right in and kind of hit the highlights of this.
Okay.
If anybody has any questions, they can contact me or any of the members of the board. First off, I just want to mention that the Hartland Conservation Commission, on behalf of the Hartland Conservation Commission, we thank you very much for letting us come in and talk to you folks tonight, because we feel that this is going to become quite an issue in the next probably 10 years, or maybe less. It depends on who transports their firewood where. So let me just start out by giving you a little bit of an introduction of what the emerald ash borer, or as it's more commonly called, the EAB, is. It's a beetle. In its adult size, it's about a ½ inch long. It's an iridescent emerald green color, and it feeds on the leaves of the ash trees, which doesn't really hurt the ash trees too awfully bad. However, in its larval form, which is where the real danger is, it is born and lives under the bark of the tree, between the cambium layer and the bark of the tree. In that process, it effectively girdles the tree, cutting off all the minerals and water going up the tree, and kills the tree. This takes a period of about 3 to 5 years after the tree is infected. The emerald ash borer came over from Asian area on board a ship into Detroit, Michigan in around 2002, and has since spread across the top of the United States into the Northeast, all over the place, killing millions and millions of ash trees. It's not particular. It doesn't care if it's a white ash, a green ash, or a black ash. It's going to kill it. The thing that we were pretty fortunate for a long time, because the emerald ash borer has been all around us. It's been in New York, it's been in Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Maine, Canada. However, last year it was found, in 2018, it was found in Orange County. And since that time, it's been found in the town of Orange, town of Montpelier, town of Groton. It's been found in Grand Isle County, somewhere around, the name escapes me, South Ural. And it's also been found on our southern border with Massachusetts in the county of Bennington, in the town of Stamford. So it's here. The problem is, it's inevitable that it's going to get here. It's inevitable it's going to kill trees. In its natural form, it moves rather slowly, about 1 mile to 2 miles a year. But what happens is it gets transported in things like logs and firewood, and that's how it moves extensive amounts of distance in a very short period of time. What we do know is there's no good way right now to stop the infestation. Nobody has found anything. There's no natural predators that kill the bug or anything like that. Woodpeckers will eat them, but the problem is that the larval form is under the bark doing its damage. Then the woodpecker finds it, and typically it's a pileated woodpecker, and I'm sure all of you have seen the results of a pileated woodpecker. So if the larvae doesn't kill the tree, the woodpecker basically destroys it. There is some work that's being done with a parasitic wasp. They're using them in several places. The research looks very promising, but it takes a long time to analyze and get the results, because they have to see how the wasp populates and all that sort of stuff. So it takes a long time. There is some chemical treatments that can be done. If there was a particular tree that for whatever reason we really felt like we needed to save it, it can be chemically treated. That's very effective, but it's ongoing. It never ends. You have to treat it every year, every other year, depending on what chemical you're using. It requires a certified applicator to do it. It's expensive. It obviously is not something that you're going to do for an ash forest. You're not going to go out there and start sticking this stuff in all these ash trees. So, what does all this mean for the town of Heartland? Well, we started looking at this back last year, around October, I think, something like that, of last year. Started looking at various management plans other towns have put together to handle this type of a problem. And the first thing we have to do is get an inventory of what we have for trees. So we got together, we went out, we did a windshield survey, drive-by windshield survey. We picked five roads in Heartland. We picked the Queechee Road from Three Corners to the Chute Road, Mace Hill Road out through Lover's Lane, Merritt Hill over to the Queechee Road. From Four Corners, we did the Brownsville Road from Four Corners out to the Best Road, and we did Rice Road from County Road to Route 5, and we did Clay Hill Road in North Heartland. And we felt that would give us some kind of a representative sampling of how many ash trees we might expect to find. We were looking at those roads partly because of trying to get some kind of a representative sampling, but also because we wanted to pick some areas that were rather heavily traveled or might be traveled, like with delivering wood or that sort of thing. So that's why we picked those roads. And the outcome was we counted nearly 500 trees on about 11 miles of road. And that ranged in size from anything below 4 inch, approximately 4 inch, we didn't bother putting in the count, on up through over 20 inches, 24 inches. Some of the trees were over 24. So taking that number and breaking it down, brings it down to about 45 trees per mile. And then we multiply that by 75 miles of town road in the town of Heartland. And this I didn't do this on purpose, but the exciting part is on the back side. What happens is, that means we have about 3,400 trees that we have to deal with sometime within the next probably 10 to 12 years. And what I did was I went in and started looking around Vermont Urban and Community Forest website. They've done quite a bit of extensive work with finding averages for trees and so on. They gave an estimate of about $18.33 per inch diameter tree at breast height. Then they went on to give this listing of $155 to $3,400 per tree. And then it said there are many factors that affect the cost of taking down a tree, which if you think about it, that's true. For what we're looking at for the town of Heartland, we're looking at anything that's within the town right away, which is approximately 50 feet, 25 feet from center line. Tree within that range of the road is typically not going to be something that you can just step up to, make a wedge cut, make a batch cut, and drop the tree on the ground, which is the simplest and easiest way to get rid of a tree. Chances are you're going to have traffic control. That's the first thing. The second thing you've got to have is you're probably going to have, if you can get to the tree while it's still alive, then you can have an arborist climb the tree and take it down piece by piece. Once a guy goes off the ground, that's money. If you're not taking a guy off the ground, you've got a bucket truck in there, or you've got a crane in there taking that tree down. Again, money. There's things like, what do you do with the tree once it's on the ground? The Conservation Commission is kind of tossing around some ideas that might be a possibility. Depending on when we can get to the trees, there's a possibility of perhaps some of them going for logs, which would help to recoup a little bit of cost. We were tossing around an idea of maybe a community wood bank where individuals could come in and buy a cord of wood or buy 2 or 3 cord of wood, whatever they needed for the winter, and take it out of that wood bank. Again, some way to kind of try and recoup a little bit of cost. But anyway, what it comes down to is if we take the 155 and add to the 3,400, divide by 2 to come up with an average, you're looking at almost $1,800 per tree to take down a tree. And I don't think that that's really out of range. I feel that's really right, just about on the money for what it's going to take down a decent sized ash tree, either in the power lines or in the road, or maybe both. So, what are we up against? I heard somebody saying something about, Mary, what was the concern about $4 million?
Jeez.
I know a place where we can use it.
Yeah.
We're looking at an expenditure of somewhere around $6 million coming up. And what the problem is this is not a maybe, this is a definite. Unless something happens in the next 5 or 10 years, that they find some kind of deterrent for this emerald ash borer, this is going to happen. It's just like the Dutch elm disease, what happened to the American chestnut tree, what's happening with the parathrip and the maple trees. It's something that it's there. And the problem you have here is this is going to become a public hazard. These trees are going to die, they're going to start shedding, and they're going to start falling down, and they're going to become a public hazard. Please understand that this is just a quick outline. We wanted to get this on your radar and get you thinking about it a little bit. We'll be continuing to work on a document, and we'll keep you updated as we move forward. Hopefully some of the things we can come up with is some ideas of what to do with the wood when it comes down, and try and keep you posted on what kind of treatments are becoming available.
Now, is there anybody who would take these trees down for free because they want the wood? While the tree's still alive? Why not?
It's just, there's not that much money in them. The problem is, like I said, if it was forested land, where you could go in and just cut the trees and drop them underground, limb them out, limb the tops out, and be done with it, pull the logs out, pull the firewood out, yeah, you might get somebody that would take that.
Yeah.
But the tree itself is not that highly valuable, not when you stop and think about all that it takes to get it on the ground. Yeah. And some of the trees will not even be marketable, simply from the standpoint that they were used as fence posts in years past. And if a mill finds wire in your wood, they don't want that anymore. So that rules that out. Yeah, it's a sticky wicket, and that's why we wanted to bring it to your attention at this point. So thank you very much.
That's it? You're gonna leave?
They told me I had 10 minutes.
Wow.
Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah, I'll entertain questions if you want to take a little more
How
time.
about, is there any state funding?
There is some minor amounts of state funding right now for helping with management plans. The management plans that I've seen have been pretty much done by outside concerns for the towns, which obviously runs some money.
But this is kind of a management plan, isn't it? I mean, what else could they say in a management plan?
Well, one of the things, Mary, that I keep tossing around is that I've read probably half a dozen of them, and they all say the same thing, just in a little bit different wording. And it's basically, oh my God, we've got a problem coming, we've got to start thinking about how do we budget for this and how do we manage it. Just to give you a feel, in 2014, the last one I looked at was done in 2014 for Enosburg. With their people, with their town crew taking down the trees, they were predicting $60 a tree to take them down. And I don't think they're treating themselves fairly doing that. It's costing them a lot more than $60.
Must not have the flaggers or the.
You know, you're not counting your man hours, you're not counting your equipment, you got dump trucks, you got loaders, you've got chainsaws, all this stuff built in there, it's not $60 a tree, trust me. And that's why $1,700 a tree looks like a lot of money. But I will tell you that as soon as you start putting a flagging crew like was down here, out there, you know, you're paying $100 an hour for that flagging crew. And then you've got, like I say, you get trucks, you get cranes to take things down. $1,700 is not out of the ballpark.
John, are there towns in any of the counties where the infestation has been sort of discovered? Are they being proactive, or are they just being passive and
I think the general feel, Phil, is that they're being actually quite proactive moving forward. The city of Rutland is actually cutting 300 and some odd trees, I believe, as a proactive thing to kind of try and not have the emerald ash borer in their town. So they're moving forward, cutting all our trees, which I don't fully agree with that either. Hopefully, the emerald ash borer will do what the beech has done and will evolve a little bit, or not the emerald ash borer, but the ash tree will evolve a bit and put up its own defense against the emerald ash borer. Beech is starting to come back real heavy now again.
interesting?
And there was a time frame when beech did the same thing, it was just dying off. And you got beech scab and it was dying off. Anything else?
Well, so this started in Michigan in 2002, so has there been any sign that the trees are developing a defense?
I think there is some, but you know,
No.
I'm sorry?
No. So we probably should just take them down.
No, there's some evidence that about 1% are resistant to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you cut them all down, you're gonna take down.
The good ones.
The good ones that would then pass that on to some, hopefully, to some
But
young
maybe
trees.
the 1% is in the interior and not along the roadsides. And John's talking about, we need to remove
Yeah.
the trees as a public hazard.
I guess the question I would have is, and I probably could answer as well as anybody, but how much time you have between when you notice that it's infested or that the tree has got started and until it becomes a hazard.
Well, you've got 3 to 5 years and that tree is
So-
gonna be dead.
Yeah.
It's gonna be
So,
gone.
I mean, it's not gonna rain limbs into the road the first time a bug chews a hole in it.
No, and it's not gonna
So-
be every tree in town
No.
on the same day is all of a sudden gonna have
No.
bug infestation and it's all gonna die.
Yeah.
It's gonna be spread out over time.
So I just think you have to kind of approach them after you realize they've got a problem, rather than, I mean, I don't agree with Rutland, so.
Well, another problem is also that it's pretty difficult to find which trees are infected.
Oh, I know.
I mean, the bugs are small, the larvae are
The holes are small
undercover,
and-
so
And they
it's
start at the
extremely
top.
difficult, right.
They start at the
Extremely
top, as I
difficult to
understand.
see which trees are problem trees.
I know
You
that.
know, with that said, and Dean's 100% correct, there are certain markers that you can look for. The top will not be foliated as well
That's right.
as it's being stressed. The mark or the hole that the larva uses as it exits the tree, this is after it's already done all its damage inside, and I think the proper term is pupates into an adult, and comes out of the tree. It's a very distinctive D-shaped hole, but it's not big. It's small, you've got to get right up to it to see it. The other thing you'll find is, once the larva is in the tree and in there for a while, woodpeckers will start really pecking away at the tree and really starting to pull the bark off. Of course, by that time, things are pretty much out of hand.
One other thing to look for is sprouting on
Corner.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the tree.
yeah.
And didn't you say, John, that Windsor County has the highest concentration of ash trees of the whole state, or?
Yeah, it's something like 6% of the whole state.
Of the hardwoods.
Yeah.
Of the hardwoods.
Yeah.
So Hartford did a plan about 3 or 4 years ago, I think, and they estimated that if you count the interior of their wooded land as well as what's along the roads, they figure they have 260,000 ash trees. About 1,700 of those are along their roads. But that's a lot of trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and in relation to Mary's question earlier, to make it viable, as John said, you're not dealing with cutting down trees right next to each other. They're
Right.
spread out over
Yeah.
so many miles of roadway, so you're cutting one here and one someplace else, which obviously increases your cost.
There's no easy answer. The only thing I can tell you for dead certain is that if we do nothing, that'll definitely be the most expensive solution. We've got to do something. What right now, I can't tell you. I don't really know.
So you don't have a proposal?
No, not at this time. No, we can keep working to that goal, definitely. Be able to bring some kind of proposal. But at this time, it's more to get this on your radar, let you know that it's out there, and it's not going to go away.
John, I wonder if there are any reports available from towns further west where they have actually gone through all this.
Oh, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there is. I've been looking for communities in Vermont, roughly about the size of Hartland, just to see what their thoughts were and what they were up against.
I just learned last night that in Nebraska, the county foresters are identifying trees, and they're working with farmers to sort of cut them. So they're growing. I guess it's hit that area pretty badly.
Really? Yeah.
And I was totally surprised, because I thought it was all this side of the Mississippi.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that it moved west that much either. Yeah. I do want to, before I forget again, because I did forget, Knox Johnson's put out an email to everybody on the Conservation Commission. He's been in contact with, her name is Elsie Shadler, from, where is she from here in Knox?
I think she's UVM, but they're going to have a municipal management workshop on EAB for Windsor County, April 16th. And
It's one of a series of regional meetings that they're having to try and get a handle on what can we do. They recognize this is not going to be something that can be taken lightly by towns. It's going to be a burden. It's going to be a heavy financial burden. So they're trying to work with towns. It says that the location is to be determined. It's April 16th. I'm sure it'll be somewhere in the area we can at least get to. It's to help bring folks like the select board and so on up to speed. What can you do? What's available out there? So hopefully.
So does it affect only mature trees? Or
Anything over 1 inch in diameter.
oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very, very nondescript, I guess. That's the right word. That's the right word.
Non-discriminatory.
Non-discriminatory, there you go. All right, any other questions? Anything else I can't answer for you?
No, this is great. I'm so glad that you did such a thorough report.
No.
Really good.
No.
And now when you come up with the money, that would be
I know
great.
that. I heard there was $4 million floating around. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. God.
So, we have a report about the 17 acres from someone?
So I don't need $6 million.
come on.
So I'm Jennifer Waite from the Conservation Commission. I've got some handouts, but my computer bonked out, so I've only got 4 packets. Sorry.
You can share.
Is it on government shutdown?
Right, yes, my printer is on furlough. Thank you. So, just to back up a little bit, I was going to tell you a little bit about the 17-acre wood, and I was wondering, does everybody know where it is? Who's been down there? So, just wanted to update you on where the Conservation Commission and the elementary school are on our efforts to make that into a more accessible and inclusive public park. The nice thing about it is that recently we got a grant with the elementary school from the Welborn Trust to be able to bring on a trail designer who is experienced in non-paved accessible trails, and they're going to help us with making the entry down into the 17-acre wood. If you guys know it, it's very steep, it's very unstable slope, and it's pretty skinny, that northern part of the parcel. So that's one of our big pieces right now, is to be able to get down into the parcel and create a better access to their outdoor classroom and to enlarge the trail system to include most of the 17-acre wood. The other thing that we're doing, which is really fun with the elementary school, is that the kids in the art class are designing a logo for the 17-acre wood. So I can't wait to find out what they've come up with. Apparently they've got several different things they're excited about. And the outdoor classroom, they want to expand that as well. Right now they have a cool lean-to that they've created, but they want to make it a little bit more sheltered and have a few more facilities and places to store things down there for when they have their all-day classroom use. And to also make it so that all the other grades can get down there, can use it as often as some of the younger grades are for the, I don't know if they're still calling it Wednesday in the Woods. So the school and the Conservation Commission have been working together since Mr. Davis transferred it, quitclaimed it to the town. And the cool thing about it is that with the school parcel is about the same size as the 17-acre wood, so it effectively doubles the size that our school has in terms of places for them to go for learning and for outdoor recreation and education, which is awesome. The things that we wanted to update you about were what I just talked about having this grant for timber and stone to be working with us to get a better way and safer way to get down there and to make it as accessible to as many folks as we can. That detailed cost estimate and detailed plan will allow us to go for bigger funding that the state offers for these kinds of municipal projects and school-related projects. One of the things that we also worked on initially was just to get to know the parcel more. We did some bird walks, we had a breakfast about it, we've had folks who know what they're doing go down there and look at the ecosystem, look at the different flora and fauna. There's some really cool things down there for being such a small piece of land. And we've been following up with the initial discovery of an incursion on the southern part of the parcel. We've had Bill Stack and Tim Rookwood and looking at Bruno's initial survey, and there is, Twin State Utilities has gone over the boundary and is on the town land. And one thing that we were really hoping the select board could do is to solve that incursion, to reclaim that boundary as the town land, and to make the 17-acre wood whole again. I understand from some minutes that you had forwarded that in 2016, I think Bob had talked to Twin State and said, well, we could maybe set up a lease arrangement, but my understanding is that lease arrangement never happened. And I'm kind of wondering why it would, because if somebody set up an RV behind the library, it wouldn't stay there. But because it's a 17-acre wood and it's kind of out of sight, out of mind, it doesn't seem like that's been as important to solve that incursion as perhaps if it had been a more prominent piece of property. So we'd really love to figure out a way with the select board to get that piece settled, because we'd love to be able to take the trails and stuff more down in that area, and also just, it's town property. And I think that's the biggest thing. So the two things I think for the select board would be to help us solve the property line issue, and the second thing would be when we can get this study done and get a plan done, we'll be needing to go for bigger funding to do construction of an accessible trail system, and we'll need the town support for that.
What
in the
kind of
future.
support? Would that be financial support?
No, we'd probably have to do our own, fundraising for that, but we'd need the town might have to be the applicant. There's a lot of those funding sources for the town or the municipality needs to be the applicant. And we would work with the elementary school and with the select board to get that done, but that would be an essential element going forward. So in the packet, there's where the 17-acre wood is. There's a picture of the trail system as proposed and the part that's built already in the first part. And just a little focus area just to show you where, for those who aren't familiar, where the blip is for the property violation.
I actually cannot read that key.
Oh, so on the part that has the trails, the yellow is already built and would be improved, and then the dashed red is a lower trail system that actually kind of exists already, but that we would make, that we would complete as part of a larger grant. Because there's a couple little bridges that need to go in there, and we've got improvement of bridges from parents' help and Conservation Commission help, but to get down there, it's wet and it needs a little more planning and construction work. But it's a pretty cool piece of land.
Where is the little lean-to?
It's right on that yellow loop, pretty much right at the bottom of it. It's a little boardwalk bridge.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long does it take to get back to the school from there? Walking?
From the little ravine thing? Oh, it's really close. 5 minutes. Yeah. So they scramble down the hill on Mike Heaney's trail and go across a little bridge, and then there's a nice little loop. There's a flat area there, and they've got the lean-to right in the middle of it.
Jennifer, I'm sure everyone's heard of it, would you talk a little bit about the film that was made?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. What's it called?
It's called
We showed it at the library. The best day ever.
Yes, best day.
It's so awesome. And so this whole idea of an outdoor day came from Scandinavia. So it highlights, was it 2 or 3 schools? 3 schools? 2 schools.
Norwich.
And Hartland. And it just follows the classroom as they go out there and what they do all day long. And it's really remarkable.
Who made it?
Independent filmmakers.
It was Antioch.
Yeah, it was David Silver.
Yeah, this whole outdoors, just as a point of interest, my wife teaches at the nursery school down here, and she's been doing outdoor Fridays for 2 or 3 years and had fabulous success. And the national trend is to get kids outdoors for at least a day because it's so incredible for their education. Kids that are really problem kids, for some reason, just smooth right out. It's really wonderful. It really is a good thing.
Yeah, and there's 2 things that make this kind of a lucky break for the town, and one is that it's harder for schools to come up with budgets to take long field trips to natural areas. So having something besides the flat, open soccer field to study nature in, I mean, having this whole ecosystem is completely different right out their back door is pretty amazing. And the other thing is that, which is amazing to me, is that everybody says, oh, the Vermont kids are outside all the time, and not necessarily, so it's a great opportunity, and it's been really fun working with the elementary school. They're all over it.
Well, and certainly the feedback that we get from the teachers there is the kids are totally psyched for it. They really do want to continue it. And right now, I think it's restricted just to the kindergartners, but they have high hopes of, if we can make this more accessible, getting more kids down there.
Right. So any questions?
I'm wondering, what about handicap accessibility? Is that too steep? Is that too steep?
That's the part that we've got Timber and Stone working on, is that access. And they've done, we had the Wellborn grant, and plus a match from the Conservation Commission is paying for that design study. So Josh Ryan, who did the boardwalk at Esquibog, It's the same, that's one reason why I went with that group, because they worked with the Nature Club, and they were really excited about working with Heartland again. So he's gone to the site just before that first snow in November that never left. And he said, yeah, it's pretty challenging. There's a reason it hasn't been done yet, but he thinks that it is possible to do. So we're going to follow up on that once the snow melts.
Could the handicap access be a different access? Does it have to be the same access?
Well, if you look at the map, it's a pretty thin little boundary. It's pretty narrow right there. And the only other place would be down off of Martinsville. And we talked to the school, and the Conservation Commission talked about, and everyone felt like keeping one access that was behind the school would be the safest thing to do. And just sort of keep it a loop trail. And the other thing was that actually up that spot off of Martinsville is really wet too, so it'd be really hard to.
A lot of trees would probably have to come down off of Martinsville.
Oh, they
Maybe they're all ashes.
Yeah.
They probably are.
It's great. It's a great project.
Yeah, it's a great project. It's a good thing. Any other questions?
What are the chances of you getting that grant?
A bigger grant?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have no chance at all if you don't get a design study done.
Yeah.
So that's the big key, was trying to find that first bunch of money to be able to get a design. Then you can take that design and go shop it around. And usually you do have to have a local match, so, but you could do a phased kind of thing. We could work with the trail designer to do, a phased implementation, which would be a little less money at a
I
time.
think I recall when we met with Josh.
They're not cheap, that's the trails.
Well, no, it's not cheap, but he said his success rate after doing one of these preliminary reports, getting a larger grant, is like 95%. Plus, it doesn't have to be, it is a match, but it doesn't have to be in money, it can be in kind.
Oh, yeah.
So, if you can put some labor into it and maybe some equipment, you can pay it back in kind rather than in monetary value.
The other really nice thing about, another reason why we went with Timber and Stone, is because that company works with youth groups all the time. They do what they call hybrid projects, which is, instead of just being a contractor and sending his crew out there, 3 or 4 people, they'll work with Youth Conservation Corps, or they'll have community days. I mean, that's their preferred method of building. So I think that's really attractive too, is to be able to bring kids in whenever they can in a safe way to help create the trail and to update or upgrade the outdoor classroom. Because otherwise it's a total missed opportunity.
That's good. We are aware of the boundary line issue.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's not top on the list, but I agree, we ought to settle it. I don't know what the rest of the board thinks, but.
Yeah, I guess I don't know what the process would be, or how the town deals with that kind of thing, but if there's anything we can do to help move that forward. I think it's also a way for the town to establish that having a park at the 17-acre wood is a recognized part of the agenda for the town and for the school. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your
Thanks
time.
so much, Jen.
Noise.
Do it in between.
You don't have to run off.
Yeah. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so Dave, you ready to talk about the budget a little bit?
So, if you have specific questions, you can let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to kind of do a broad brush on this. It is a familiar story. It's been with us since August, September, since we first got into the budget. We are trending over budget essentially for two reasons. One, our legal fees, particularly towards the 3 appeals on the property taxes, and again, on the activity center with the painting and the work that we did at the front to restabilize the work that we did there. If we continue to trend as we are, and again, there are some additional legal expenses still to come, but it looks as though we're going to trend about $37,000 over. Again, that's if we kind of go, there's some things that we're running under budget on, there's a couple of things that we're running over budget on, but you know, those two big things alone. And again, I'll just point out, I pointed this out last meeting, we did set aside or raise $75,000 to go towards the deficit that John Mudgett spoke about briefly in the general fund. So we're not in danger of, you know, hanging ourselves here by going over budget. However, the problem is that it doesn't get us, you know, we are moving backwards as far as trying to alleviate ourselves at that general fund deficit. Yep.
Is it realistic to expect that a town will ever have a no deficit year?
Why wouldn't it be?
Because there's always stuff you don't budget for, always.
Well, I think a lot of towns might over budget.
Oh.
Or be better, well, maybe
I don't
not
think you're
better at it,
supposed to
but
over-budget.
more honest with themselves about budgeting. I don't know.
So the problem with the general fund deficit is that's a cumulative deficit. So that's what we've accumulated and we're not shaking at the rate that we're going. So that's the problem with the general fund. Compared to, yeah, if you have a year and you've got a bad winter such as that we're having now, that's a possibility. But, you know, generally you try and, you know, trend towards raising what you expect to spend. And then if you go over any particular year, you know, claw that back, you know, the following year or you know, you address it. Again, in this case, we've had, you know, an accumulation of deficits. It does appear as though some of that was offset in the highway. You know, so we have a highway surplus, which I think John is kind of alluding to, in that our fund balances are somewhat healthy. Mm-hmm. If you look at that surplus compared to the deficit, it kind of balances itself. The big thing I would mention is that we do seem to have highway issues, and we did claw into that this year when we put down the hard pack and, you know, made some other decisions, you know, and I think I foresee that in the future as well. So I'm, you know, we essentially utilized $90,000 of surplus to offset taxes last year. I'm hesitant to continue that trend.
Right.
So we do need to look towards that general fund deficit. Matt brought up last meeting, you know, one of those ways to alleviate that is the following year you raise that essentially with the tax rate to offset that. I think that we will need to cross that bridge at some point soon. You know, the ultimate question is getting our arms around the ultimate number. You know, when we audit, that audit gives us a very precise number. He did talk about that 60-day period between when we closed June 30th, and then there is a 60-day period where certain things come into the prior year and certain things get deferred, you know, and we need to raise, we set the tax rate in July is right about the time that that's all going on. So it just makes that number a little bit. But I think that we do need to, I think we'll have a general idea of what that number is, just not specific. The one item I will point out is, again, the library maintenance budget item is right, you know, we're halfway through, and, you know, I think that number is like $7,000 and we're at like 6,900 or something like that. So that's just perennially a problem. And, you know, each year we have upped that a little bit, but, you know, between, you know, the HVAC seems to be kind of the biggest beast over there as we piece that together and keep it going. And then just some other pieces to the puzzle, electrical or what have you. It's just a consistent problem, and I think we are addressing it, but it's just a line item I would point out. Last meeting I did mention, and I'm going to point this out, on the revenue side, there is concern there as well. On page 1 of the revenue, about a little bit more than halfway down is the state of Vermont hold harmless. That is the money that we get from the state of Vermont to offset the current use program. That number, the estimated revenue was 212,000 and the actual number was 180. So you can see where we've got a problem on the revenue side as well as on the expense side. When I was talking about that $37,000 hole on the expense side, we seem to have a matching hole on the revenue side. And that 212 was simply kind of, us looking at that last year. It seemed to have been trending in that direction, and at the end of the day, last year's current use program was down. By the time we got all the adjustments, it actually trended downwards instead of upwards like Hartland had been. And for this budget year, it remains at about the 180. We had already budgeted for it and had gone to, town meeting and everything, but this year's budget only calls for the 180,000 in revenue, but creates a problem for this budget.
Have people pulled their land out of current use, or what accounts for that? Varying amount of things. Some of it is people pulling it out of current use. The other problem is that the state is kind of a mess when it comes to the Department of Taxes and the Department of Education, as far as what that means to municipalities and setting tax rates is problematic for municipalities. The Department of Education is having a very difficult time with municipalities as far as letting us know, or letting the school boards know, what the state funding is going to be for the local taxes for the schools. And the current use program, up until recently, they've been very behind and shorthanded, and the current use program has been problematic for them and for us. And I think that this is just a matter of them cleaning up various, through the years, people pull out or add or, delineate or whatever happens to the property, kind of caught up with them, and this is the number we've got. I feel a little bit more comfortable with the current use program from the state now than I did, say, 3 years ago, or even 2 years ago, but it's very difficult for municipalities, and that's all I'll say, as far as some of these programs being administered by the state of Vermont and the relationship that we have with them on that. Highway, real quick, we are trending we haven't done the paving, but, considering that being about $120,000, $118,000 project, we're trending about 25,000 over, but that's about what I was shooting for or expecting back when we decided to apply more hard pack and, a couple other things to the roads, and that would be offset by the surplus that the highway has.
Have you adjusted any of the fees, either for maybe what Clyde's charging or the rec center, as far as
Clyde's
just inflationary
fees,
stuff?
Clyde's, the printing fees are set in statute, or as some of the other ones with Clyde. The rec department, I'd have to go back and talk with John. I think a year and a half ago, 2 years, about when I came on, they adjusted their fees, the after-school program, and some of the things like that. And I think that we're still lower than most other towns, or certainly any other after-school program. that's not also funded by the state of Vermont. However, I think there's some discussion that, and we certainly can look at it, but if it was offset, or if we were to raise that, we think that the additional scholarship request would also go up. So there's some concern there. At the moment, there seems to be a happy medium. You know, last budget year, I got into a little bit more about the rec center and how much those revenues offset the programs. And I think that in my discussions, it's been a while since I've talked about this, but I think that the goal is to kind of offset John's salary, maybe John's and Joe's, but half of Joe's is also a little bit less than half is picked up at the school. You know, so I think that if I recall, based upon the policy that you guys have kind of abided by, the revenues are hitting that. You know, it's a matter of, you know, how much do you want the revenues to, you know, offset the expenses and et cetera. At the moment, that seems to be fairly stable. You know, if the expenses go up, we tend to see the revenues go up because the expenses are kind of due to higher use, which is kind of driven by higher, you know, revenue from that use. And actually, I think that overall the expenses and revenues have kind of stabilized this year over last. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, what transpires. But so the answer to the rec one is we haven't truly looked at that probably in maybe 2 years at this point.
So when John's got a trip, he must look at the cost of the trip and say, we're gonna do it for this much, or how does the process work?
They do, it generally does offset the program expense, yes. So I take that back. So I'm just thinking your question of the policy. I think that the policy of the town has been that the revenues pay for the programs and the actual salary of the directors have been paid for by the town and the school, if I recall.
That's right.
So, which has been trending to be correct.
Yeah.
Last time we looked.
With the budget that you've proposed, when hopefully all of us are sitting here next year at this time, what do you predict? I know you don't have a crystal ball.
For a budget we're looking at next year, I think that we are going to, I think the paving and some of the road work, I think the paving will continue to need to be tweaked. And I think that some of the additional road work will need to be looked at. I don't have a definitive answer on that. I think it, again, materials on the dirt roads and subcontracting, we'll have to look at how successful we are this year and how that looks. I think that we will need to continue to either spend or save on building maintenance. I think that the two biggest things coming down the pike next would be runoff drainage problems, both here at Damon Hall and at the rec center. You know, it's particularly over by that area there, you know, around, you know, again, I think I put in one of my updates, you know, as I was heading down to Boston, I was getting updates from the staff, you know, the rec center had a leak, the activity center had a very big leak, you know, the lister's office had a leak, my office had a leak. The rec center roof had a leak and in the back. So I think that those two things are probably fairly big, and will continue to generate most of our discussion.
And we replaced one of the two HVAC units in the library, where we cobbled together a fix.
Yeah, I would say it has been rebuilt to a point. I think that gives us, I think that it may give us 5 more years life on it. I think that there's, as a system as a whole, I think we need to, be thinking of that in the back of our minds. It's one of those ones I'd hate to wake up, which is possible, and it's decided to quit. But right now, we put a fair amount into one piece of that unit, which is a fairly large part of it.
I wonder, with the changes in technology, whether, rather than just swap it out for more of the same, we shouldn't be looking at alternatives, like heat pumps or something. Another conversation. I'm not want to go there right now.
That would be a long conversation.
But, yeah. I think, Gordon, you were asking, just the longer range piece.
Yeah, just wondering, we presume they designed a budget that's going to pay our bills.
We'll get into this during the junk ordinance enforcement agenda. There's some concerns there for this year's budget a little bit. I think that ultimately a long-term discussion budget-wise, I think would need to be some of these junk or problem properties. I don't think that they're going away. If anything, they seem to continue to cause problems for us. And by the time they get to this stage, it's more problematic for us to deal with. The Blake property is one that we will be in possession of in the next 7-8 months. We'll need to go through, a process. We won't really, this one has kept me up the last couple of weeks, actually. There will be some legal issues there when that property changes hands. The other thing is I don't think, now that I've thought this through, you can really budget for what we may or may not need to do to that property to get it, to get it back on the tax rolls. I think that's one that we're gonna have to get on, walk around, maybe get Two Rivers involved. I don't know what's up there. I've heard some stories, that one keeps me up at night. And, these issues are not in the budget. The property off of Weed Road is not in the budget. Dealing with the Blake property, other than the initial legal steps that we need to take, are not really there. Nor are, we've got Downing property on Martinsville Road that is delinquent on taxes that will need to be addressed this spring. We have the Thibodeau property that's problematic. These are all big problems that we don't have a structure for or really a budget for. And that could be problematic for us. I think that the budget talked about a little bit about the adjustments, the changeover in the finance office, the smoothest that's been, as good of the personnel that we have in there. Just the change and the newness and getting to understand this, so that we don't miss things or something to that effect. The newness, both myself and Martin, let alone we had 3 other people in there through the course of the year. This is just, helps, putting these numbers in place, somewhat problematic. But I think that this year's budget is a stepping stone towards, I see this as being, a few years process before we kind of figure out where this balance is and moving forward.
So Norwich, for example, and St. Johnsbury, they had no deficits at the end of their
So
fiscal
Tale
year?
of Two Towns, St. Johnsbury is about as close as to bankruptcy I've ever seen a town.
Oh.
It was just chaos from politics that my boss stepped into, and we sorted out. And that took 2 years of some severe angst in town, and some real, hey, look, it's not this, it's that. These are the numbers that it needs to be, and that was politics more than anything. Just refusing to accept what needed to happen and to be honest with the numbers that needed to be presented was truly what was going on in St. Johnsbury. Norwich, although I just saw that they're fighting and having, fighting for a budget cut, I honestly can't figure that one out because they've gone through all the pain to get to where they needed to go. When I was there, they had an extremely well-documented capital plan and capital budget in place. So they knew, for instance, Andy, who was there from the highway department, we always knew a year in advance what we were going to do for paving. And we could guesstimate based upon square footage of asphalt what that was going to cost. There was a couple of years there that they were running, 1%, 2%, 2.5% increases. It was very stable, but they went through kind of a growing period where they had to save money and get to a point to where they needed to go. And when FEMA hit and they had, $1 million of outflow before they got money from FEMA, they had $800,000 cushion that softened that blow that would allow them to carry it over. Now, they had to go out and get a line of credit to, because it was actually, might have been multi-million-dollar, issues that they had over there, but they had enough to kind of get them through. And they made a policy several years back that said we're going to, carry 15% of our fund balance, essentially as extra fund. We're not going to run at a zero fund balance, which means if you go below that, you're running a deficit. You've got $10 more. You've got $10. They ran with an $850,000, fund balance, which was essentially 10 to 15% of their overall budget. Now that I'm talking, that's what they carried. And there was some real political discussion as to whether that was beneficial to the town or not. There was always that, okay, let's give some of that back to the taxpayer. And my predecessor there was savvy enough to argue that they should keep it there. And before I got there and after I got there, they had two major storm events that was offset by the money that they had in the bank. We don't have that. If we do, it's going to, we've got money in the bank, but that money is earmarked towards, money for the fire trucks, money for the highway equipment. That money is kind of designated to something. Mm-hmm. So sure, we can borrow from that for an extremely short amount of time, but, know that the next day, one of the trucks goes out, well, we borrowed from it, we don't have that. So there's a little bit of a difference between the two. So two vastly different towns. And one was, to their credit, they had a group of people that sat down and said, we're going to conscientiously decide to put money away. And St. J, a small group of people who conscientiously said, we're going to run this town, we're going to slash everything that there is to slash, and we're going to be heroes. And they literally almost bankrupted the town. I mean, it was a budgeting thing, expenses that fabricated revenue, and just it's like seriously. So it does happen, So John's right. I mean, we're a small town. We have our revenues and expenses, but I think we do need to understand the budget and the services that we have and what it's going to cost to to do that.
Okay. You ready to move on? You've got more to say.
You can, if I'm over the 10 minutes, you can just ring the bell and cut me off.
Times 2.5. I've been keeping track.
We're done with that one.
That's okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, we have to hear that stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dave. So, what do you want to talk about? The junk ordinance? You gonna?
What about town meeting?
Oh, yeah, skipping over.
So town meeting prep, what I have for you is the warning, and I put on yours a big word over the top being draft. And what has come in literally after I just sent that out to you guys was the Nature Conservancy called up and said, oh, hey, by the way, it's been 5 years since you gave us tax exemption. It needs to be voted on every 5 years. So I looked, so what the heck is this? Why the 5-year thing? Talked with the assessors, talked with Clyde, and yes, that is true. 5 years ago, March of 14, I think it was, you had on the ballot a vote to provide a Nature Conservancy and the other group that's with them, the
Wildflower.
I think I was going to say dandelions. So, so I added that. So I've got a new, one to hand out that you can look at, and this would need to be signed. And I've got one other thing. For as long as I know, or at least as the ones that I've looked through, going back to whenever. You've got an article on the warning about borrowing money. It's always there. The town by statute, the select board has the ability to borrow money for only specific purposes. But two of those purposes are for cash flow reasons. So if you needed to, let's just say there's some towns that run on a calendar year and they don't get there, like St. Jay, for instance, it's the craziest thing. The year started in January and they collected taxes in like November. So you went like 8 months with, so there was essentially a tax anticipation note. Well, if there's a cash flow issue by statute, the select board can borrow money, but it's no more than 1 year. Okay. Also, if you run a deficit, you can borrow money, and that's laid out in statute. This article always said borrow for 5 years. Well, the tax anticipation notes don't go for 5 years; they only go for maximum of 1. And generally, when you're borrowing for cash flow purposes in the municipalities, only 1 year. And the statute kind of lays that out. When I spoke to Paul Giuliani, bond counsel, who I kind of go to for these matters, I ran by, what if the select board was just looking for the ability to borrow for 5 years for the purchase of an asset or something. He said he didn't think that language cut it. So there's really no reason for the language. By statute, it gives you the authority to borrow for cash flow purposes, and the language that you have on here isn't really, in his words, you could probably drive a truck through it. It doesn't really allow you to borrow to purchase something for 5 years either. It's not kind of like a blanket, yep, we just allow you to borrow for whatever you might want to for 5 years. It doesn't really allow you to do that either. So my recommendation would just be to do away with it.
Article 9, just delete it?
Yes.
So I thought we were gonna put on here something about borrowing, doing a bond.
No.
Yeah.
No?
We can't do that because we don't have the amount. We're doing the study to get the amount.
Oh, okay. All right. And then, okay, the other question is Article 7. I thought that money was, it was gonna be like 60-something, not 73.1, for the SCBA.
Well, there's a camera in there too, which
I
was
know.
67, wasn't it, or something?
I thought between the two of them, it was still in the 60s.
My understanding was, the SCBA equipment came in the 60, something range, and I can't remember the exact breakdown between the two, but the number seems about right from what John was saying. And that's down from 110 or 120
Right.
that he was quoting last year just for the SCBA equipment.
Yeah, I remember that.
So do we need to, how do we go about deleting Article 9? Because it does sound like it's extraneous and misleading.
It's not right. It's actually not right. You can't borrow really for cash flow purposes for 5
For
years.
5 years, right?
Because you just don't get a tax anticipation note type of thing, or a line of credit. If it was a line of credit, we renew every year. In a tax anticipation note, you only know the taxes that you're gonna get for this year. And by statute, it allows you to borrow for those purposes for a year. The language also doesn't allow you to, in his mind, borrow for a fire truck for 5 years either. The language doesn't allow you, isn't permissible for that.
Because we'd have to specify fire truck.
Yeah, and it's just not, the language, borrow from a commercial lender for a term of no longer than 5 years for expenses in anticipation of taxes, and to execute and deliver their notes or notes of the select board, which tells me you were looking for, if you ran a deficit or you couldn't collect your taxes, you were looking for kind of a catch-all, which statute gives you the authority to do.
So we can just not put it in?
You don't need it.
Okay, that's what you're,
Yeah. But we do want to add, and that's,
So I thought I made 5 copies, but I guess I didn't. I lifted essentially from your language of 2014. Shall the town vote to exempt from taxes for a period of 5 years the property located at 241 Garment Hill Road, Esquabog, which is owned by both the Nature Conservatory and the New England Wildflower Association, and is used exclusively for the purposes of such organizations.
Conservancy, right?
Say that?
So is it it should be conservancy, not conservatory.
Oh. It's a good thing I can change that, and we can sign it.
As far as I know, that's what it is.
Let me look at the other copy to see if I caught it.
it's a conservatory is a building.
Yeah, no, I was thinking
Yeah.
Space Conservatory.
Conservatory, yeah.
So that's the second page, so I will, before we go, if you approve this, before we go tonight, I can change that real quick, print it out, and have you sign it. If you, I think the motion is what would count in this instance.
I'm concerned about this farmer's market thing. Are they a nonprofit?
I think so.
Huh?
I think they are.
I think so. Do they have a tax exempt status? Nobody knows.
I'm just, it's just one, if you wanna, gloss through it and hand it down, or I can make 5 copies, but,
I'm not against the farmer's market in the least. I think if we're gonna, town's gonna support things, it needs to be enough, make sure it's and not a private organization.
Right. I mean, Gordon, they're on here because they're asking for more money than we had allocated in the
That's right,
past.
that's right.
And did they went
No,
through-
they've never been on here,
We've
Phil.
never given them money.
They weren't on here before, no, that's right.
Okay.
This is new thing.
So it's new, okay.
Yeah.
Did they have to get a petition?
Yeah,
They did,
yeah.
they did that.
See, it says,
Okay.
petition.
I don't know that requires us to put it on the line.
Oh,
Really? I thought
I'm
if
not
they
sure.
got a petition, we had to put it up.
they can petition around the select board. The select board has the ability to put them on without a petition. I think once they petition, then they've
We have to,
petitioned to go on.
We
yeah,
have to put them on.
yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure about that.
I kind of went around a little bit with Chuck Fenton on this about Heartland Community Connections, about what constitutes, and my understanding is I think the language simply says someone can petition the town to raise funds. Not sure that they differentiate between a nonprofit and a for-profit, but people that have come to see me, I simply have said to them, I think it's best that you have some, that is not just going in your bank account, that you have some sort of a organizational framework, and that it goes into some sort of organizational bank account, so that the people voting on that have some sort of confidence that is going towards the intended purpose, not just, some jelly beans or something.
So do we have reports from all of these
All
organizations?
except the new folks. So we don't have one from Farmers Market.
Or cover?
No, we've got one from Cover Home Repair.
They just upped their amount, I think, right?
They upped it?
Yep,
What
so-
was it, do you know?
500.
Ooh.
I think last year, there was a bit of discussion on them at town meeting day, and I think the ultimate decision was, well, they didn't ask for it, so why are we giving it to them?
Oh, and so,
This year,
I
they came
forgot
back and
that.
asked for it. So,
okay.
yeah. So you're right, I will need to just change that to conservancy for you to sign it, but if you would make a motion on it in open session, then I think that would be best.
We still do have a nurse for the community nurse program?
Yep, it's
Yeah.
right there at the top.
I know, but is there actually, do they
I
have a
don't know if they
person?
have one or
I
not.
think they're searching for one,
Oh.
last I knew. But I think that the intent is to keep the program going if
If they don't get it,
At all
then we'll
possible.
have to pay her.
Oh, okay.
Don't worry about that.
I'll make a motion to accept the 9 articles.
10, actually,
Well, we're deleting one and
but we added one. So here's the copy.
make a motion to accept the 10 articles to be presented to the town.
On the
Town meeting
warning.
day.
Actually, yeah, I would to accept the warning as, it's actually the town warning, or
Okay.
the warning for town meeting, yeah.
So what did I say?
To accept the warning as presented.
For town meeting, March 5th, 2019?
Yeah.
How's that sound? That sounded good, Phil.
Sounds really good, thank you.
Second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay.
Sounded so good.
You good with that?
I'm not sure that that should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, you got a unanimous yes on that, Dave, so we can.
Okay, I'll change that after, have you guys sign it.
See, what I was, no, we can't sign this now.
No, I need to change conservancy,
Yeah.
thanks.
Sorry, Dave.
Wait,
Shouldn't
it's
have
right
read
here.
it aloud.
No, it's right conservancy right there, I don't read my own notes. so.
I'd be happy if you put a comment right there.
I'll give you a website.
How about my
you should
dates?
look at.
How are the dates look? Where's the
No,
comma?
that's the,
Where's the comma?
after night 2000.
You're gonna write it on here?
Yeah.
Okay.
What was wrong?
You didn't catch that
Extra
last year.
comma there,
Oh,
Okay,
and on the back page, an extra comma after January.
All right,
I mean,
Martha.
that's minor, but
No, it's important.
the whole town's gonna read it.
where was she when I was like in 8th grade?
you know, he has to have a comma after.
I wouldn't know that. Oh, yeah, look at that.
Who's
That's
this, Ash?
Ashby.
Ashby?
Yeah.
Cool. Cycle through Ashby.
Junk ordinance.
So, somewhat the same discussion as before, although based upon Martha's question, well, do we just leave it alone? And so I called back out to Rob Mamby, and his response was, no, you should still send out the letter, and you don't have to act on it. So I believe it was 90 days after documented. It was documented as being there on December 3rd, which is probably still a couple weeks after it was there. It was photographed. He says you don't need to act on it right away after the 90 days. You can send out another one saying, hey, it's been 90 days, you know, what are you gonna do? That was his recommendation regardless.
So the letter would go to the
Property owner.
property owner saying you're in violation. Is that what the?
That you will be, that we've noticed that it's there, more or less. We've noticed that it's there. You have a 90-day period before you would be in violation, of which on that date, that's when you would be in violation of the judge's order, because the judge's order states one car, no cars, unless he is a certified junk person, which I don't think he is. It's not registered, or it's not inspected anyways. So that is his recommendation. My feeling is still the same. That leads us, you know, at some point you need to act on that. Otherwise, we're back to sending him oodles of letters and threats and, you know, kind of going down that rabbit hole. It is, you know, we would be going, so this is not addressed in the budget. However, as on the flip side to this, as Mr. Mamby pointed out, and I have seen the pictures, this was one property unlike any other property that he has seen anyways, or have I for that matter, based upon the pictures. And the danger is somewhere along the lines he, you know, reverts back to that state. So that's what's in front of us now. Much like the conversation I just had on the budget, I've got to ask at some point in time, you know, what's the answer to this? You know, we've got oodles of other properties. You know, at this point it's one car. We've got lots of other properties that are very bad and are creating headaches for us on the flip side, you know, at the end game here, that we've got to deal with. So I just put that out there that you know, if we take this road at some point in time, the question simply would be, you know, there really is nothing in place for us to deal with this, yet we seem to be dealing with it at some point.
What do you mean there's nothing? We have an ordinance. What else?
So my answer, and I'm not trying to be a wise ass, but let me just probe and ask how well that has, in dealing with or in carrying out your ordinance, how well has that worked? Yeah. My only comment would be that where, you know, your enforcement lies is essentially on me. You know, my ability to, you know, there's just nothing in place to follow up and, you know, deal with this in a more proactive manner. And I think that, yes, at some point in time, if you decide to understand what this is doing to us and take steps to put in place to deal with it, I think that, yes, there is ultimately going to be some upfront legal costs to confront the 12.5 properties out there that are very, very problematic. My only answer to that is I've got 2 on my plate now that have already been, actually 3 if you count the 21 house, that have been very expensive to us and will continue to be, you know, to get to where we need to go to put this back out and get it on the tax rolls. I don't, you know, the way we're going now, you know, I'm essentially, you know, we're, you know, kind of almost acting as a real estate investment corporation. You know, I can almost go into this in private practice and pick up, you know, people actually make money at this. We can't do that. We can't go out and pick up these properties, sell them, and put it towards the tax rate. It's not allowed. It's not something we can do. We can cover our costs, but that's a whole lot of time and effort just to recover our costs, to clean it up. So it's one way or the other. And I've poked around, you know, I have looked at, and this, I understand, has been discussed for many, many, many years in Hartland, and the answer just seems to be, we won't, you know, it's okay if that's his property and that's his land, that's all fine. My only comment would be is at this point, it is starting to come back to, you know, if I go after the next 2-3 properties that are delinquent, you know, those are not healthy properties, and we'll need to deal with it with at least one of those, I think. You know, so that makes, you know, another property we gotta deal with. That's a big conversation, not for today. You know, at the moment, we're just simply talking about sending a letter out, but I think it, you know, there's certainly, it certainly is a heavy discussion. There's a lot wrapped up in that whole issue. I mean, there's a lot there.
Dave, I'm hearing that, I'm not sure what words to use, but that we don't have the infrastructure to stand behind the policy that we created. We don't have
Machine guns.
We don't have money for legal fees. We don't have the labor who's going to actually, who on the staff is going to be responsible for taking photographs, knocking on the doors, starting the legal action.
Yep. But at the moment, we're just talking about a letter. But it will, you know, that's not something we've really budgeted for. So between the Blake property and Coley was to say we go, and it cost us $5,000.
Yeah. Yeah, I do feel that we've taken a first step this year by recognizing that we have had delinquent properties and we had a tax sale. So I think the word on the street is a little bit different now. And I don't see the harm in sending out the letter and making 2 copies so that in 3 months, we can send another letter with a different date on it, until we actually can feel, what are we going to do?
I think we'll end up there, but that's just,
Yeah.
you know, I think that, you know, and again, maybe not, but it's based upon what I've heard, I think that if we want the, you know, if we're gonna send it out, we want it removed, then ultimately, I think we're gonna have to ask for it to be moved, and I think that that'll probably happen via a judge, but that's not all that harmful or expensive, but I'll leave it with the agenda item as is. That's just, you know, let's just keep it simple for now. The other one's pretty deep and dark and lengthy discussion, but we can just stick with the letter. The lawyer's recommendation is to send a letter.
Okay.
And the letter would say what?
Again, just, you know, my basic slang here is that we've noticed a vehicle. Judge's order said that you can, you know, if you were to have a vehicle, you need to be a registered junkyard person. There's a 90-day period before anybody can act, and, you know, that's the date, and if you go beyond, you'll be in violation.
So can you cut and paste that judge's order?
I'm probably going to rely a little bit on Mr. Mamby to write it. You know, somewhere in there would be a sentence out of the judgment, I'm sure, you know, and that this, you know, part of the statute that's being quoted here, the 90-day thing.
Is this car, you know, kind of a collector's piece? That piece
No,
up?
no, God, no. I bet it came from the property in Windsor, because they're after them in Windsor. So, it's like a shell game.
It's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Musical cars.
Yeah, it's a musical car. There you go.
Okay.
You know, like old police cars turn taxi cars turn, so,
Yeah.
you know, park junk,
Yeah.
then it's a collector's item.
So Phil, we had a plan several years ago that was to move along with that cleanup project, to test the soil.
I remember from town meeting that
Yeah.
one of the kind of lingering problems was there some sort of contamination?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know that there's any,
Yeah.
if there's anything to worry about. We wanted to test, it's gonna cost a little money, and I think we have a right to do that. That's one of the questions for Rob. We can go there and do that, and then we can ask for Fred to ante up with what he owes us. And then, if he doesn't pay us,
Yeah.
I think we can foreclose, like a foreclosure. Certainly is nowhere near that simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was sort of what we had in mind. And I think we should make moves in that direction.
So motion on the subject would probably be beneficial.
Something like that.
I screwed up the last one, so you
I think it's Matt's turn.
No.
Yes, Matt. Why not? Okay, that's enough. All right, I would make a motion that we direct the town manager to request that the town lawyer, Robert Manby, write a letter to the property owner in question, quoting the judgment against him. I don't know. Is that sufficient? Matt would have said it better, but, you know, he wouldn't do it.
I would say quoting the non-compliance of the judgment, or the violation of the judgment. or something.
Noting that there is a
Yeah.
non-compliance of the
that
Judgment.
The owner is in non-compliance,
of the judgment against him.
but that's why we're going for a lawyer for that part. We just want to write the letter. I'll second it. Whatever it is that we're crafting.
Are we all good with this?
Are you good with it?
I don't know.
It's just a letter. Well, all right, well, what do you think? We should,
Well, I probably should have talked up more during the discussion part of it.
okay, but you, this is now the discussion.
I think we should send him a letter first without going to the lawyer. What's the difference if he's not gonna comply? But,
A threatening letter?
or to tell him our intentions, I mean,
Yeah.
Just a letter that we noted.
our
at
intentions.
present.
Rather than come from the town rather than the lawyer.
yeah.
Just to save some money, or?
It's not a bad idea because we
Just to be a little less threatening.
be less threatening. We're not down to get Fred. That's not our issue. We're not trying to. We just want him to be a little bit more responsible with us.
Is there a reason, Dave, you think it needs to come from the lawyer?
So I think, if I can understand Matt, maybe, let me just, it sounds to me, Matt, like you want a more informal, hey, Fred,
We noticed that there's a car
we
there.
noticed,
Yeah.
please, let's please try and work towards resolving this so that we don't need to, go through a more formal process type thing. The letter from Rob, the reason why I'm involved, Rob, it would be from the town. It would just, what I'm looking
Yeah.
for, Rob, is just simply to make sure that this is correct,
Mm.
so that I don't get 6 months down the road and it was like, well, you should have had this is just one of those things that, I can.
That's what I thought I heard you say. It wasn't coming from the, letterhead of the lawyer. It's
No.
coming from-
But it's going to be a formal letter that looks and reads like it came from a lawyer with my signature and our letterhead is what it's going to be. And that reasoning for that is just to make sure that, I could probably maybe type it up myself and send it to Rob to edit, but I think it's probably going to be the same work effort one way or the other.
Yeah.
I thought maybe, Matt, I was hearing before you take the more formal letter that you kind of send something out and say, hey, just to maybe try and resolve this in a more friendlier, less formal, less confrontational type of a way, but, maybe I just read into that too much.
Is that what you meant?
Yeah, I mean, you get more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. Well, you never know, I mean.
Well, his
you don't
family
know.
may not know that the judgment says.
That's what I would do.
you
I wouldn't
can't
even
put-
I wouldn't write a letter to begin with. I might go talk to some family members first.
They may not know you can't put vehicles back on that property.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering.
Dave, do you think there's any legal dangers?
I think that the conversation, the only difference I see, Matt, is I think the conversation needs to happen with Fred. I don't know whether it happens through I think that, somewhere down the line, talking with one of the sons or whoever, may be a good way to go, but at the end of the day, whether it's with one of them, perhaps, and going to see Fred or something like that, and, sitting down and, having an informal chat, just, so that they know, or maybe reaching out, but I think ultimately, Fred is the property owner, and he's going to need to hear that, so that there's no Fred, oh, well, I didn't hear that, and, the son maybe tried to do good, but, the conversation didn't go direct. That would be my only fear of, I don't think it's a bad idea, I just
About
would want to
doing-
make sure that Fred was involved somehow, so that the message does get directly to Fred.
How about doing both? Send a letter and someone speak to one of the family members.
I'm a little apprehensive about that approach. Just some previous experiences that I've had.
All right, I'm all for sending the letter then.
I mean, I'm talking about approaching Ted or one of the other boys. I'm saying that, I don't think that's a good idea.
You don't, all right.
But, I do like the idea of a friendly letter though.
A what?
A friendly letter. A more friendly letter. Maybe it's just a matter of getting the wording less confrontational in the letter.
I think we need to send a letter. We need to start the process of saying we notice, and maybe,
I think we can draft something.
Okay.
I can send something out, I think that straddles the plane here.
Okay. I mean, I don't want to create the slippery slope that the letter is so friendly that he can come back and say, gee, guys,
Where's the barbecue?
yeah.
Right, the motion as stated, it says draft a letter. Doesn't mention the word friendly.
No, it doesn't need to say that.
Okay.
We get the message.
Do we have a second?
We did, you
Oh.
seconded.
But that motion was just direct Dave to have the lawyer write it. So I'd like to amend that motion.
The lawyer review it. I thought it was what we were moving toward. Or maybe we don't need the lawyer.
Yeah, we're splitting hairs. Let's just say write a letter.
Yeah.
Use your good judgment.
Told you, you should have said this motion.
I'll let you screw it up.
Yeah, thanks.
Makes us
Okay.
all look smarter.
So I guess we're all in agreement here, I think. Right?
Write a letter.
Okay. Moving along.
There's a lot of things on here.
Yeah, well, how are we with our time schedule?
Terrible. Mileage thing we can sign. That shouldn't take long. Is this,
We don't get to count the interstate, no?
Nice try.
we should.
Here's the formal one. Mileage is the same as last year.
Okay. Sign up at the top.
Yeah.
So this is just state roads in,
This is just the select board signing the obvious. That, this is our mileage, and this is kind of dictates what we get, state aid money from the, aid money from the state.
boy, we're talking about letters being exact. We have 100.692. They won't round up and give us a few extra dollars.
I was just wondering about that. What if we rounded up like to 500 miles or something? How that would be perceived?
That's pretty good. Thanks.
I'll send you a postcard in jail.
Where our inmates are now, where in Mississippi or Missouri or something?
What's it time for this?
It is time for that.
Are you, this is two separate motions?
It is, yes.
This, I'll just read, I don't,
You can,
That makes sense. Oh, you want to say it as
yes. Well, you don't have
Why
to,
is there a motion that premature?
you can say that I make a motion that premature knowledge would clearly put us at a disadvantage. So you're basically saying that if, the reason why it would be executive session is because if it was talked about in public session and the person, was involved in the legal matter, was privy to that discussion, that would put us at a premature disadvantage to various things. So my understanding of the language of the statute is that in order to go into an executive session, you need to find that this would put you at a premature disadvantage before you can make the motion to go into executive session. So you need to agree amongst yourselves that this is important.
Can we do that without Mary at the table?
I think so.
Okay.
I think we'll be
Is
okay.
the Campbell Merit Fund going to be covered now or in?
No, we can't use executive session for that.
Okay,
So we're not really ready.
yep.
We just do that. Just not quite yet, no. You gotta stay on till we actually go into executive session.
And that's when you come back from there, is that going to be in the meeting?
Say that again?
Are you going to be coming back from the executive, or is that going to be in the?
No, that'll be the end. We aren't gonna have any, this is more informational, it's not going to have a conclusion or an action. So, any issues? So, we have to, we need to agree to go into executive session on this, that's all. Because if we don't go into executive session, there's the potential of it being damaging to our position.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so.
All right, I'll make a motion that premature general knowledge would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
I'll second it.
Okay, so is everybody in favor of executive session?
Aye, yes.
Okay, so, good, okay.
Aye,
And you got to do the second one.
And
And you got to
then
go into
I
executive session.
further make the motion to enter executive session to discuss the issue of a pending legal matter under the provisions of Title I, Section 313 of the Vermont statutes.
good night, Sarah, good night, Ron.
You all, and so you're in public session.
Is that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.